So the leaders are gathered in New York City for the annual United Nations General Assembly. 194 speakers are scheduled, including 76 heads of state, 2 crown princes, and 42 heads of government. Joining us now with more to comment is Voice of America correspondent Chris Casqueo, live from UN headquarters in New York City. Hi, Chris.
Hi,
Good morning
Chris.
from Indonesia.
Good evening to you from New York City outside the UN.
Okay, Chris, as we know that now is happening the UN General Assembly 2024 with main issues to be highlighted this year. So can you tell us more about it? What are the main issues about the geopolitical issues and the war and everything else that is needs to be highlighted, especially this year?
Yeah, the theme of this year's United Nations General Assembly is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. But flashpoints across the globe are already dominating the discussion here among world leaders, namely the widening conflict in the Middle East and Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. The diplomats will also discuss the war in Sudan. Despite multiple international initiatives, there has been no ceasefire, and 17 months of fighting has displaced more than 10 million people and sent millions of people into hunger.
Okay, and Chris, speaking of the speech, US President Joe Biden gave his final speech to the Assembly. What did he say about the Israel-Palestinian conflict and other issues?
Yeah, that's right. In his final address, US President Joe Biden said the world is at an inflection point in history. He warned against the full scale war in Lebanon and said it is time to end the conflict in Gaza. He said, quote, a full scale war is not in anyone's interest, adding that a diplomatic solution is still possible. Now, further speaking on Gaza, Biden urged the parties to finalize the terms of a ceasefire and hostage release that has been endorsed by the UN Security Council. But over the weekend, some of the top officials in the Biden administration informed the White House that it was unlikely that any ceasefire would be agreed to before the end of Biden's term in January.
So it is Biden's final speech at the UN General Assembly 2024. And how about the UN structure? Will it change? What about the possible changes to the UN structure?
Yeah, that's right. Ago, President Biden announced that the United States supporting expanding the number of permanent members on the 15-nation Security Council. Now, earlier in September, his UN envoy, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, announced that the administration would support 2 permanent seats for Africa and 1 for Latin American and Caribbean countries, in addition to India, Japan, and Germany, but they would not have veto power. And Linda Thomas-Greenfield went on to say that Washington is ready to begin text-based negotiations on the expansion, saying it means we're ready to work with other countries to negotiate language, prepare amendments, and ready this resolution for a vote in the General Assembly and ultimately amend the UN Charter, she said to an audience last week at the Council of Foreign Relations here in New York. Now, Security Council reform, as it's known, has for decades been a topic of much discussion here at the General Assembly, but no action has been taken. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said he would like to also see the council change. On Sunday, he opened his signature 2-day Summit of the Future, in which institutional reform was high on the agenda. And he said one of the questions that is important in relation to the future relates to the role of the so-called P5, the US, China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom that have the veto power over any resolutions, and the need to have certain redistribution of power to make things more fair and more effective. So there may be a chance that we see some reforms to the UN Security Council before the week is over.
And Chris, speaking about the future actions for our country, what steps is Indonesia taking to support international peace and security at the UN General Assembly 2024?
Yes, Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi is leading the Indonesian delegation here. at the UN General Assembly. And she delivered three main messages at that Summit of the Future on Monday. First, creating a lasting peace, peace that creates justice, stability, and development. And in this context, FM Retno called for an immediate end to what she termed the genocide committed by Israel in Palestine and emphasized the importance of a two-state solution for Palestine. Second, she mentioned safeguarding the right to development. And finally, promoting an inclusive world order, which meaning a more adaptive, responsive, and effective global governance must be realized through the reform of the Security Council, as we had just discussed, global financial architecture, and a multilateral trading system.
Okay, that's such a report from you, and thank you very much. But is there anything that you would want to add for the UN General Assembly, especially after the President Biden final speech for this General Assembly 2024, or maybe to state your hope for the world?
Yeah, it's interesting to see all of the world leaders gathered here under one roof. You know, these are nations that are in direct conflict with each other, yet they're forced to face each other's leaders. And as far as President Biden, there's kind of a celebratory and valedictory nature to his address. I mean, there was a celebration at the Clinton Global Foundation where he received a surprise award from former President Clinton for his decades of service. And, you know, so it's kind of a farewell to Biden as he exits the world stage, and the U.S. is going to determine its next leader. It's actually already in the process of determining its next leader, as early voting has started here in the U.S. presidential election already.
Yes, and on his speech, President Biden also mentioned that he's been very, very honored to lead America for the past years. And we are very honored too, Chris, to have you here with us on Starting Point to report on the UN General Assembly 2024. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and we will see you again later this week for another report.